The roar of the engines sputtered into silence as Jack wrestled with the controls of his failing spacecraft. Smoke billowed from the dashboard as he glanced at the rapidly approaching surface of the alien planet. With a final, jarring thud, the ship skidded across the rocky terrain, coming to a halt against a jagged outcrop. Jack's breaths were heavy in the cramped cockpit as he pried himself free from the harness. Outside, the winds howled over the desolate landscape, carrying with them a chill that seeped through the cracks of the damaged hull. He grabbed his survival pack, filled with basic medical supplies, a water purifier, and a few days' rations, and activated the emergency beacon, though he knew help was days, if not weeks, away. Stepping outside, Jack surveyed the barren terrain, a mix of sharp rocks and sparse vegetation under a sky streaked with the orange hues of the setting sun. He needed to find shelter before the planet's notorious night predators began their hunt. As he trekked through a narrow valley, his flashlight beam caught a flicker of movement. Concealing himself behind a boulder, he watched cautiously. It wasn't a creature, but a person, lying motionless at the base of a distant cliff. Jack approached slowly, ensuring not to startle the figure. It was a young woman with an ethereal glow to her skin, her body adorned in tattered robes. She stirred weakly as he neared. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you," Jack said softly, kneeling beside her. His voice felt out of place in the eerie silence of the alien landscape. The woman's eyes fluttered open, revealing irises that shimmered like liquid metal. Fear was evident in her gaze as she tried to recoil, but her strength failed her. "I'm here to help," Jack reassured, offering a water bottle. "Can you understand me?" She stared at him, confusion etched across her features, then nodded slightly, accepting the water with a trembling hand. "What's your name? What happened here?" Jack asked, scanning the area for any threats. "Lyra," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I was left here. They thought I was cursed." "Who left you?" "Your people." Jack pressed gently as he checked her for injuries, finding bruises and a few cuts, but nothing life-threatening. "Yes," Lyra managed to say. "They left me to die." Jack's expression hardened at the cruelty of her people. "Well, I'm Jack, and I'm not leaving you here. Can you walk?" Lyra tried to push herself up, wincing in pain. Jack quickly supported her, helping her to stand. "We need to find shelter," he explained. "There are creatures that come out at night, and we're not safe in the open." With Lyra leaning heavily on him, they made their way back to his crashed ship. The trek was slow, and the darkness of night began to envelop the planet, bringing with it a drop in temperature and the distant howls of nocturnal predators. As they reached the ship, Jack helped Lyra inside and settled her against a wall with some blankets. "You'll be warmer in here. Tomorrow, I'll check if there's a way to send a distress signal from your people's technology," he said, starting to plan their next steps. Lyra looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of fear and gratitude. "Why help me?" she asked, a trace of suspicion in her tone. Jack smiled. "Because where I come from, we don't leave anyone behind, especially not those in need." The two sat in the relative safety of the damaged ship, the silence around them a stark reminder of their isolation. As Lyra drifted into a troubled sleep, Jack kept watch, his thoughts troubled by the day's revelations. He knew that come morning, their survival would depend on more than just avoiding the planet's monstrous creatures. It would depend on their ability to trust and rely on each other. As the first light of dawn crept through the cracks of the spacecraft, Jack was already awake, rummaging through the debris for anything useful. Lyra stirred, her eyes opening slowly to the new day. "Good morning," Jack greeted without looking up. "I'm trying to find parts to fix the communicator. We might get lucky and catch a signal from a passing ship." Lyra watched him curiously, sitting up and pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Can I help?" she asked, her voice still weak but steadier than the night before. Jack glanced at her, considering, then nodded. "Actually, yes. You could help me sort through these parts. Tell me if anything looks familiar or useful." Together, they sifted through the scattered technology. Lyra picked up a small, metallic object, turning it over in her hands. "This is a transponder chip. It's used in our communication devices," she explained, handing it to Jack. "Perfect," Jack said. A a small smile breaking through his serious demeanor. This could be just what we need. As they worked, Jack asked questions about her planet's technology and culture, piecing together a mental map of her world and its people. Lyra, in turn, was curious about Earth and human customs, her questions thoughtful and intelligent. "Why did you come to this planet?" Lyra asked, her gaze fixed on a small screen Jack was trying to power up. "I'm a researcher," Jack replied, his attention on his task. "I study planets and their ecosystems." This one was next on my list, though I didn't expect it to be quite so adventurous. Lyra laughed softly, the sound surprisingly melodic. "Adventure is good, though, isn't it? It keeps life interesting." Jack looked up, meeting her eyes. "It does. But too much adventure can be dangerous without the right company." They shared a smile, the morning passing quickly as they talked and worked together. By midday, Jack had managed to assemble a makeshift communicator from the salvaged parts. He held it up with a triumphant grin. "Let's test this out," he said, moving to the ship's battered exterior to set up the device. Lyra followed, watching intently as Jack adjusted the settings and pointed the antenna toward the sky. "Here goes nothing," Jack muttered, activating the device. A static hum filled the air, then crackling noises, and finally, a clear signal beeped through. Lyra's face lit up. "It's working." "It's working," Jack confirmed, a relief washing over him. "Now, we just need to get a message out." Together, they crafted a distress signal, detailing their location and situation. Jack explained each step, ensuring Lyra understood the process. "How do you know so much about all this?" Lyra asked, her curiosity piqued as she watched him work. Jack shrugged. "Years of training and a few too many emergency situations. You pick things up." As they worked on boosting the signal, a deeper understanding grew between them. Jack was impressed by Lyra's quick learning and her ability to adapt to human technology. Lyra, on her part, found comfort in Jack's calm expertise and the careful way he included her in every step. With the communicator finally broadcasting their distress call, they retreated back to the safety of the ship, the alien sun high in the sky casting long, stark shadows across the rocky landscape. "Now we wait," Jack said, leaning against the ship's hull. "It could take days or even weeks for anyone to respond." Lyra nodded, sitting beside him. "And if no one comes?" Jack turned to her, his expression serious. "Then we'll think of something else. We'll keep trying until we find a way off this planet." Lyra smiled, her fear tempered by his determination. "With you here, I believe we might just make it." As they sat in silence, watching the horizon, their shared struggle had formed the beginning of an unexpected partnership, one that might prove to be their greatest strength in the challenges to come. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the alien landscape into shades of twilight. Inside the spacecraft, Jack and Lyra sat opposite each other, a makeshift table between them littered with various tools and components. "All right, let's work on understanding each other better. This language barrier could be a problem if we need to coordinate quickly," Jack said, tapping a small device he had been tinkering with, a rudimentary translator cobbled together from the ship's technology. Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting her eagerness to bridge the gap between them. "I agree. What do you propose?" Jack held up 2 headsets, wires spilling over like tendrils. "We try these. I've set them to analyze and translate our languages based on the data we input. It's basic, but it should help." He handed one to Lyra, who fitted it over her ears, mimicking Jack's actions. "How does this work?" she inquired, her voice echoing slightly through the device. "As we talk, it learns. It's not perfect, but it'll get better the more we use it," Jack explained, his voice tinged with static through the translation process. They spent the next hour talking about simple things, colors, numbers, items around them, to teach the translator the basics of their languages. The device occasionally spat out garbled nonsense, which led to laughter and more corrections. "Tell me about your family," Jack said, testing a more complex sentence structure through the translator. Lyra's expression softened. "I have 2 sisters and a brother. We are very close, but I miss them very much now." The translator hesitated, then delivered a clear enough version of her words. Jack nodded, understanding. I have a sister back on Earth. I can't imagine being in your position, so far away from them. Their conversation meandered to other topics: favorite foods, childhood memories, dreams for the future. With each word, the translator improved, and their understanding deepened. As they chatted, Jack noted how Lyra's initial reservations seemed to melt away, replaced by a warm openness. "This is nice," Lyra commented at one point. "Talking like this, being understood." Jack agreed. "It is. I didn't realize how much I missed just talking to someone about normal things." The makeshift table became less of a barrier and more of a bridge as they shared stories and laughter, the alien night noises a mere backdrop to their burgeoning friendship. After a while, Jack steered the conversation back to practical matters. "We need to think about finding more food and water soon. We can't stay put forever." Lyra nodded seriously. "There are places I know of, but they are far. We would need to prepare." "We should make a plan then," Jack suggested. "List what we need to take, figure out the route. Can you draw a map?" Lyra fetched some paper from Jack's supply and began to sketch the terrain, explaining landmarks and potential hazards. Jack took notes, adding suggestions and calculating distances. Their collaborative planning stretched late into the night, both of them too engrossed to notice the passing time. Finally, Jack yawned, stretching his arms. "We should get some rest. We've got a big day ahead of us." Lyra looked at the maps and lists they had made, a sense of accomplishment in her eyes. "Thank you, Jack, for making me feel useful." Jack smiled, touched by her words. "Thank you, Lyra, for being here. I wouldn't want to face this place alone." They settled down for the night, the ship quiet except for the hum of the still operating equipment. Outside, the alien world seemed less foreboding, a testament to how much had changed between them in just a few hours of shared words and plans. As they drifted off to sleep, the distance between two worlds seemed just a little bit smaller. The morning light filtered softly through the small windows of the spacecraft as Jack and Lyra prepared for the day ahead. The air was crisp, signaling a change in weather that might make their journey to gather supplies more challenging. Jack adjusted the straps on his backpack, checking the contents one last time. "Do you think we'll be okay with the weather changing like this?" he asked, looking out at the swirling clouds gathering on the horizon. Lyra, who was packing her own bag, paused to glance at the sky. "It will be colder, maybe wetter, but we can manage if we keep a good pace. We should reach the first waypoint by midday if we're quick." Jack nodded, impressed by her resolve. "All right then, let's go over the plan one more time," he suggested, pulling out the map Lyra had drawn the night before. They sat down, the map spread out between them. "We follow this path." Lyra pointed to a trail marked on the paper, "through the valley here, avoiding the open plains, too exposed. We aim for the cluster of trees for cover if the weather turns worse." Jack traced the route with his finger, committing it to memory. "What about food sources along the way? Any chance we could forage?" "There are some edible plants in the forested area here." Lyra circled a part of the map. "I can show you what to look for. Also, small streams should be safe for water if we purify it." "Sounds good. And the communication device?" Jack asked, tapping the small, makeshift transmitter they planned to bring along. "I'll carry it. If we get a signal boost at higher ground, we can try to send another distress call," Lyra said, slipping the device into her bag. Their preparations complete, they shouldered their packs and stepped out into the alien landscape. The ground was rough underfoot, and the air grew cooler as they made their way along the path Lyra had mapped out. As they walked, they talked about Earth, about Lyra's planet, about the stars. It was during these conversations that Jack realized how much he had come to enjoy Lyra's company. "Did you always want to be a researcher?" Lyra asked, stepping carefully over a fallen log. Jack chuckled. "I think so. Ever since I was a kid. I loved finding out how things worked, exploring places. What about you? What was life like before all this?" Lyra was silent for a moment, her gaze distant. "I was studying to be a healer in my community. Plants, medicines, cures. That was my world. That knowledge is probably why you've survived here as long as you have," Jack pointed out. Lyra smiled, a little sadly. "Perhaps. But there's so much more I wanted to do. Maybe, if we get out of here, I could continue my studies. I hope you get that chance, Jack said sincerely. They continued walking, reaching the forested area Lyra had mentioned earlier. She led Jack through identifying various plants, which they collected for food and medicinal purposes. Here, this one is good for inflammation, Lyra explained, handing him a leafy green plant. Jack examined it, then stored it in his pack. You'd make a great teacher, you know, Lyra laughed. Maybe one day. For now, let's focus on being good students. There's a lot this planet can teach us. The day passed with them making steady progress. They managed to refill their water supplies and gathered enough food for a few days. As the sun began to set, they found a sheltered spot to camp, protected from the wind and hidden from any potential dangers. As they settled down for the night, Jack looked over at Lyra, who was gazing at the stars emerging in the night sky. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? Lyra turned to him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. For everything today. For teaching me, for sharing this journey with me, Jack replied, his voice low. Lyra smiled, her expression warm. And thank you for listening, for helping me keep going. They shared a look, a moment of mutual gratitude, before turning their attention back to the night sky, each lost in their thoughts about the day's journey and the days to come. The dawn was a gray wash, the light filtered through heavy clouds. Jack and Lyra woke early, the ground beneath them damp with morning dew. They packed up their campsite quietly, each falling into the routine they had established over the last few days. Jack stowed the last of their gear, zipping up his pack before turning to Lyra. Looks like we might get some rain today. You sure those caves you mentioned are nearby? Yes, they're not far. We can reach them by midday if we keep a good pace, Lyra replied, adjusting the straps on her own backpack. Her confidence in navigating their surroundings had grown visibly, something Jack found increasingly reassuring. As they set off, the terrain became more challenging. The forest gave way to rocky outcrops and steep inclines. Lyra took the lead, pointing out safer paths and occasionally helping Jack navigate the trickier sections. Back on Earth, I used to hike a lot, Jack said as they climbed a particularly steep slope. But I've got to admit, this planet's geography takes it to a whole new level. Lyra laughed, pulling herself up onto a large flat rock and reaching down to offer Jack a hand. You're doing well, though. I'm impressed. Jack accepted her hand, grateful for the assistance. Thanks. I'm glad one of us knows what they're doing out here. The conversation turned to lighter topics as they walked. Jack was curious about Lyra's life before she was left behind, and she shared stories of her family and friends, her education, and the events that led up to her exile. It was a misunderstanding, Lyra explained as they paused for a short break. A prophecy misinterpreted, fear overtaking reason. It's a long story, but essentially, they thought I would bring disaster. Jack listened intently, handing her a water bottle. Seems like they were the disaster, not you. Lyra smiled sadly, taking a sip before handing the bottle back. Maybe. But now, I just want to focus on getting back, proving them wrong. They resumed their journey, the landscape opening up as they approached the region of the caves. The sky was beginning to darken, heavy clouds rolling in with the promise of rain. We need to hurry, Lyra said, her eyes scanning the horizon. The caves are just beyond that ridge. As they reached the caves, the first drops of rain began to fall, quickly turning into a downpour. Jack and Lyra ducked into the nearest cave, relieved to be out of the weather. Inside, the cave was dry and surprisingly spacious. They took off their packs, setting them aside to explore the immediate area. This will be a good place to stay for a while, Jack said, inspecting the cave walls. We can set up a camp here, maybe even use it as a base to explore further or try to make contact again. Lyra nodded, her gaze wandering around the cave. There are more of these caves along the cliff. Some might have resources we can use. Then let's make it our mission to check them out, Jack suggested, pulling out the map to mark their current location. They spent the rest of the day exploring the nearby caves, finding a few that were suitable for shelter and one that had a natural spring. As they worked, their efficiency together improved, their actions becoming more synchronized. Seems we've got a good system going, Jack noted as they returned to their main camp for the night. Lyra set down her gear, smiling. We do. It feels like we've been doing this together for years, not just a few days. As they prepared their meal over a small portable stove, the sound of the rain outside created a cozy atmosphere. They talked about their plans for the next few days, mapping out areas to explore and tasks to divide up. Jack looked over at Lyra, who was laughing at something he had said. The harsh circumstances of their meeting seemed momentarily distant. Who would have thought we'd end up here? Huh? He mused. Lyra met his gaze, her smile lingering. Not me. But I'm not sure I would have survived this long without you. Same here, Jack agreed, his expression earnest. We'll get through this, Lyra. Together. As they settled down for the night, the sound of rain mixing with the echo of their conversation, a sense of camaraderie and a burgeoning friendship filled the air, binding them closer in their shared quest for survival. Night fell quickly in the cave, the sounds of the alien world growing louder as creatures ventured out under the cover of darkness. Jack and Lyra had managed to make the space as comfortable as possible with blankets, a small fire, and the few supplies they'd salvaged from the crash. Sitting close to the fire, Jack reached into his pack, pulling out a small tin. Thought we could use something special tonight, he said, holding it out to Lyra. She tilted her head, examining it curiously. What is it? Hot cocoa mix, Jack said with a grin, shaking the tin. I figured if we're stranded on an alien planet, a little piece of home couldn't hurt. Lyra smiled, intrigued. I've never had hot cocoa. Is it like a drink? Jack chuckled, opening the tin and preparing 2 mugs with some water they'd boiled over the fire. More than a drink. It's a comfort. Something to warm you up on cold nights. He handed her one of the steaming mugs, watching as she took a cautious sip. Her eyes widened, the rich taste clearly a surprise. This is amazing. I had no idea humans made drinks like this. Jack laughed. One of our better inventions, I'd say. They clinked their mugs together in a small, silent toast, each feeling the quiet comfort of companionship. The night continued, filled with conversation. They shared stories, Jack's memories of Earth and his family, Lyra's tales of her world's landscapes and traditions. With each story, they revealed more of themselves, laying bare hopes, fears, and dreams. At one point, Jack glanced at Lyra, his gaze lingering as she laughed, her features softened by the firelight. There was something captivating about her, something that stirred a feeling he hadn't expected. Lyra noticed his gaze, meeting his eyes. She grew quiet, the energy in the cave shifting subtly as they held each other's gaze. Jack, she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. I'm glad I met you. Jack swallowed, feeling a sudden rush of warmth. Lyra, he paused, searching for the words. I don't know how this all happened, how we ended up here together, but I can't imagine going through this without you. They both sat there in silence, the unspoken emotions building between them. Then, as if by instinct, Jack reached out, his hand covering hers. She didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her hand, lacing her fingers with his. It was Lyra who broke the silence, her voice steady but filled with emotion. It's strange. I never thought I'd feel this way. Not here. Not with someone from another world. Jack nodded, his thumb tracing small circles over her hand. Maybe we're not so different after all. Maybe this is where we were supposed to end up. Lyra leaned in, her face inches from his. Her breathing quickened, mirroring his own. Slowly, he lifted his free hand, gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. She trembled at his touch, her skin warm and soft under his fingertips. They moved closer, their breaths mingling, and without another word, their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss. It was a gentle meeting, filled with the weight of their shared experiences and unspoken feelings. The kiss deepened, slow and warm, as if they were both savoring every second, every sensation. Jack's hand moved to her shoulder, pulling her closer, feeling the warmth of her body against his. Lyra's arms wrapped around his neck, her fingers threading through his hair as their kiss grew more passionate, each touch speaking volumes of the connection they had formed. They parted for a moment, gazing at each other, both breathless, yet neither wanting to break the spell. Lyra's face flushed with warmth, her voice barely audible. Jack. He held her gaze, his own voice soft. Lyra, I'm here. I'm with you. Without another word, they found themselves lost in each other's embrace, the walls of the cave fading into the background. They moved with an unspoken understanding, letting their emotions guide them as they continued to explore the connection between them. Every kiss, every touch brought them closer, binding them in a way that neither had anticipated, yet both fully embraced. As they lay together, content in each other's arms, the world outside seemed distant, unimportant. All that mattered was the closeness they had discovered, the bond that had formed between two lost souls on a forgotten planet. The night pressed on, the fire flickering softly as they drifted into a peaceful sleep, their hands entwined, their breaths steady and calm. In that quiet moment, neither spoke of the future or the uncertain journey ahead. For now, they simply held on to each other, finding warmth, comfort, and a sense of belonging that made the alien world outside feel just a little bit more like home. Morning arrived softly, the sun casting a pale light through the cave entrance. Jack and Lyra stirred, still close from the night before, sharing a moment of quiet warmth before the realities of their situation set in. As they rose and gathered their belongings, a distant hum echoed from beyond the ridge, disrupting the peace. Jack stopped, listening intently. Do you hear that? Lyra's face turned serious, her eyes scanning the sky. Yes, it sounds like a ship. It might be from my people. Jack looked at her, surprised. Are you ready for that? After everything they did? She hesitated, her expression shifting between hope and fear. If they're here, I have to face them. But will you stand by me, no matter what? Absolutely, Jack said firmly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We face this together. They left the cave and made their way toward the clearing, following the sound of the approaching ship. It descended gradually, hovering over the rocky terrain before touching down, its engines rumbling as a group of Lyra's people stepped out, their faces stern and unfamiliar. One of them, a tall figure dressed in ornate robes, stepped forward, looking between Lyra and Jack with barely concealed disdain. Lyra, he began, his voice cold. We didn't expect to find you. Accompanied, Lyra held her ground, meeting his gaze steadily. This is Jack. He saved me when you left me here. The man glanced at Jack, then back at Lyra, his expression unyielding. You should know that your exile was final. Why did you signal us? Jack cut in, his voice steady. She called for you because she deserves a chance to explain. You left her here based on fear, not facts. The man's eyes narrowed, disapproval flashing across his face. Human, this matter does not concern you. Lyra lifted her chin, stepping closer to Jack. It does concern him. Jack showed me kindness, something I didn't receive from my own people. He taught me survival and resilience. I don't intend to leave his side. A murmur ran through the group, some of them exchanging wary glances. The leader seemed to falter, but his voice remained firm. We will discuss this in private, Lyra. You may have found a companion here, but your fate is still to be decided by us. Jack placed a gentle hand on Lyra's arm, speaking low so only she could hear. Do you want me to stay, or should I give you some space? Lyra looked at him, a grateful smile softening her face. Stay, Jack. I want them to see that I am not alone. Turning back to the leader, she addressed him with newfound strength. This is my decision. If you intend to judge me, you'll have to acknowledge Jack as part of my life now. The man seemed taken aback, finally relenting. Very well, Lyra. We will consider what you've said, but know that our ways do not change easily. With a final nod, the group turned and retreated to the ship, leaving Lyra and Jack alone in the clearing. She exhaled, relief and tension mixing on her face. Thank you, she whispered, her hand finding his. I couldn't have faced them without you. Jack smiled, squeezing her hand. I told you, we're in this together. Whatever happens next, we'll face it side by side. They stood together in silence, the ship lifting off and disappearing into the sky, leaving the future open to whatever they might choose. The morning was bright, the alien sky clear after days of mist and rain. Jack and Lyra stood side by side, watching as the horizon stretched out before them, the distant silhouette of Lyra's people's ship now long gone. Jack took a deep breath, turning to her. "So, what now? They didn't exactly promise us a happy ending back there." Lyra smiled, a mixture of relief and uncertainty in her eyes. "They didn't, but I feel free. For the first time in a long time, I'm not defined by what they think of me. I can choose my own path now." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "So, what path do you want to choose?" She looked at him, her gaze steady. "I want to see more of this galaxy. I want to help others the way you helped me. And I'd like you to be there with me, if that's what you want too." Jack felt a warmth spread through his chest, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. "I'd like nothing more, Lyra. Exploring the unknown together? Sounds like the best plan I've heard in a while." They shared a quiet laugh, both of them feeling the comfort of each other's presence. The hardships, the survival, the long nights, none of it had driven them apart. Instead, it had built something unbreakable between them. "Then it's settled," Lyra said, looking up at the clear sky. "We'll need to find a way to get a new ship. Maybe we can salvage more from the wreck or find something on a nearby outpost." Jack grinned. "Sounds like the beginning of an adventure. But first, we should probably gather more supplies. I don't want to end up stranded somewhere else without a backup plan." "Good idea," she replied, her tone light. "We've become quite the survival experts, haven't we?" "Absolutely," Jack said, feigning a serious look. "Survival experts who also happen to make excellent hot cocoa under alien stars." Lyra laughed, and Jack couldn't help but feel a swell of happiness at the sound. The bleak days on this desolate planet had given him something unexpected, an ally, a friend, and perhaps something even more than that. They gathered their belongings, preparing to set out, when Lyra paused, her eyes lingering on the cave they had called home. "Do you ever think about how this all started?" she asked quietly, her voice thoughtful. Jack nodded, a soft smile on his lips. "Yeah, I think about it a lot. You were left to die on a planet filled with monsters, and yet, somehow, we found each other. I didn't think I'd be anyone's savior." She looked up at him, her gaze warm. "You were my savior, Jack. In more ways than one." They stood in silence for a moment, the gravity of her words settling between them. Then, with a quiet determination, they turned away from the cave and began their journey toward the future, side by side. As they walked, the endless possibilities stretched out before them, an open path through the stars, together.